I want to now welcome on stage our next panel, which is moderated by Nancy Yao Masbach, president of the Museum of Chinese in America. Nancy has over 20 years of leadership experience in the nonprofit and for-profit organizations. She's executive director of Yale China Association. She's held various roles at the Community Fund for Women and Girls. She's been part of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, Goldman Sachs, and she lectures at the Yale School of Drama as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And this panel is really going to talk about how ERGs, affiliating with small businesses, can have outsized impact. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. And the panel, let's give it up. Come on, let's go. No food coma in this room. Everyone, drink your hot tea, drunk tea. Don't get drunk on the tea or the Hennessy. The Hennessy is only for the panelists. It's not for you. It's only for us. So next year you can be a panelist, you get some Hennessy, but not this year. But you can have tea. There's a lot of tea. John Wang, can we just say thank you, John? Yeah. John had a small office down by Goldman 20 XY years ago, and he said, I have this thing I'm trying to do. I just want to bring notoriety to Asian American professionals, and he's been doing it so diligently, doggedly, and I think we really owe him a great debt of gratitude. And just, you can hug him later, make sure you have a mask on. So not to belabor it, but it's really great to have you all in this room. Thank you for coming out. You could do a lot of things on a very nice day in New York City in the middle of February during climate change. But I have a very deep affiliation with each one of them. One, I love tea. Two, I love Hennessy. And three, I worked at Goldman. So it's all very relevant. Yeah, it's all coming together. But I want to just, for the panelists' benefit, I want to do a quick 1, 2, 3 hand raise to get a sense of who's in the room and where you are on your professional journey. So the first question is, who feels that they are in a very clear professional trajectory today? Who feels that way? Okay, so not that many. Okay. That was about 4%. I'm not going to say I'm good at math. The second question is, who feels that ERGs within their firm open the door for their search for more professional opportunities, or, so you do one finger or two finger, or number two, feels like it's really optimally just for social outlets. So are you one, or are you two? Okay, so mostly, it looks like mostly one, that people do feel that it has become much more of a vehicle for optimizing your professional opportunities. And just lastly, and this is a little bit cynical, how many people in the room feel that the ERGs are currently only a check the box for your firm? Oh, this is a different world. Okay, awesome. So you do have the bios of the incredible Neela, who is at Goldman, the incredible Amy, who's at Hennessy, and Shunan, who actually did the most popular paid event at the Museum of Chinese America last night ever in the history of 43 years. So tea is truly an option today. But I thought the best way to start, and we'll give them sort of 1.5 to 2 minutes each, is say, how did you get to your current place on your professional journey? And I'll start with Amy.
So how did I get here? I have been in New York working for over 17 years, so I'll give you guys the abridged version. But I started off my career in actually entertainment media. I worked at places like Comedy Central, Oxygen, and True TV, doing marketing there. And I actually, 3.5 years ago, moved over to Moet Hennessy. And this is my first time in wine and spirits, but there are a lot of parallels between them both. You know, very fast paced, get to work on something that's really fun. In both industries, we always say, you know, this isn't brain surgery, we're not saving lives. You know, you have to bring some levity and some fun to both entertainment, and, you know, wine and spirits is a form of entertainment. So, you know, that's been a little bit of my professional journey, and I think, you know, just to touch on how I got there, you know, I definitely worked my way up from different roles, but I definitely had sponsors and folks who brought me along the way, every step of the way. The reason I got into wine and spirits was a former coworker of mine connecting with her, trying to actually get her a job, and then later, I was looking, and she connected me with her old boss, who brought me over to Moet Hennessy. So, I think obviously connecting and networking are so important. But I also want to touch on, I'm one of the co-leads at the Moet Hennessy Asian Pacific Community ERG, and that's been, I think, really a transformative thing for me. So you can tell from my last name, or maybe you can't, right? It's Schuster. It's like my dad was Polish, my mom was Irish, I'm adopted Korean American. And so, my Asian identity is really complex, and I didn't fully embrace it for a long time. I actually tried to suppress that part of myself, even up to the point of, a few years ago when I joined Moet Hennessy, ERGs had existed in a lot of the places I had worked, and I had always been like, that's great, but I don't feel part of that community, and it's a good thing to have, but I'm not part of that, right? And I think what happened in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, and then after all the Asian attacks, I can walk around all I want with my last name, but my face is Asian, right? And I started to realize, this is, it had been a journey for me to come to embrace that part of myself, but I think that it really opened a door to say, like, this is who you are, and I really started to learn more about it through my ERG members. One of our founders, Tanam, is here today, and he really has been a change agent at the company, and so I went from not even being a member of the ERG to actually doing some ATL programming around Lunar New Year when I was on the Hennessy team, to do some donations around Stop AAPI Hate, and then became a member of the ERG, and now I'm a co-lead. So that's been a little bit of my journey.
That's amazing. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing all of that.
That's powerful, yeah.
Neela?
Okay, I will be brief. Can everyone hear me okay? Good to see you all. This is an awesome room. Neela Paul, like many of you in the room, I imagine I'm first gen, so Bengali American. And my path really started, I kind of was very focused on having an impact-based career, and when I graduated, I thought that meant the nonprofit space. So I joined nonprofits and spent kind of the first decade of my life working with and for mission-based organizations. And at some point, you start to feel like your world may be getting smaller rather than larger, and that's kind of when I looked up and said, what do I want to do next? And a lot of the groups I've been working with were on the corporate side. So I actually created the role that I sit in today, but the first role I actually came into at Goldman was in philanthropy. So I joined the bank almost 5 years ago on the philanthropy side, kind of with the hubris of like, I will influence from the inside. You get in and you realize, okay, you have to learn the place first before you can influence the place. And I was really proud to be able to get the firm to commit $25 million in capital to HBCUs, the largest capital commitment to historically black colleges and universities in our, at that time, 150-year history. So that was both like lightning in the sky, and also made me really take a step back and say, I have underestimated this place and what I can do here. And at the time, there was a new chief diversity officer, my now boss, and I said, well, what if I came and built external engagement as a strategy within D&I? A lot of times D&I at firms is an inside game, right? You're really thinking about talent practices within our four walls, and yes, that matters, and that is a part of what I do, but my bread and butter, the thing that really gets me up every day is getting to partner with organizations like AABDC and many others, and kind of bring them into Goldman and kind of the full wealth of the firm. Yeah, there's the financial capital, but there's the people capital, there's the brand capital, kind of thinking about all the things you can activate, which actually you do need to be inside the place to know how to pull those levers. So that's a little bit of how I got to where I am.
Yale SOM MBA.
Oh yes, and along the way, when I was like, I want to run a nonprofit one day, I went to Yale thinking that's where you go to learn those things. But they also have that in common as well, yes.
Actually, I did want to survey the audience. Who are pre-graduate work? Okay, all right, so everyone's sort of in the game for a while. Shinan Tang.
Hi everyone, my name is Shinan Tang. I'm the founder of Tea Drunk. So I founded this tea company about 10 years ago, but prior to the tea company, I was also in corporate America. Myself is an immigrant. I moved to this country for high school, and then after college, I just like many immigrants do, wanted to find a very stable corporate job so I can stay in this country. I worked in technology companies, energy companies, many different companies because I also wanted to eventually move my way to New York City as well. But I mostly worked in the finance function, dealing with numbers. At the time, I was very excited about that because growing up, I was actually not very good at math. So I specifically chose that career to make myself commit to better something that I was not good at, because I wanted to challenge myself. But when I was approaching 30, I don't know about you guys, but I have a near 30 crisis. I started to think more about what I want to do if I was doing what I wanted to do. And at the time, I just feel like the signs were everywhere. I got reconnected with a childhood friend. So at the time when I moved from China to here, this friend moved to France. And through the magic of Facebook at the time, we somehow got reconnected, and then she ended up in Montreal. I immediately took a road trip to Montreal, and we drove around Canada for a couple of weeks, and we talked about what we wanted to do when we were kids. Apparently, she was doing supply chain management at the time, not finance, not supply chain management. We had better, more interesting dreams when we were little. And so I realized that, first of all, I wanted to be closer to products, and being the finance function, which is a supporting function in most corporations, that was not close to the products. And secondly, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to fund something for myself. And thirdly, this is kind of interesting. My friends still laugh at me about this. Was at the time I was thinking, should I be sailing around the world, or should I start my own business? That was actually the two decisions I was debating at the time, because I was thinking if I want to continue my pursuit of my relationship with this world or without this world. But anyway, eventually I found tea. I grew up drinking tea. My family is a foodies family. So I think if I were to work with the products, the one thing I would know more than average people would be something food and beverage. And tea especially is lacking in this country. And also, as I was doing my research, tea was able to take me to rural China. I was able to relearn my heritage. I grew up in the city in China. So it allowed me to see a kind of China that I didn't even know about before. There were things that I only read in literature, but I was able to see firsthand. I sometimes need to trek mountains for days. I hike alone. I slept on islands that was not inhabited, but I didn't know that at the time. So it really satisfied that adventurous side of me as well. So all these things together, I was like, okay, I'm able to fund my own business, doing something meaningful where I had the goal of I wanted to change the world, and tea, I think, being something that has a great cultural barrier that I'm going to change that and break that cultural barrier. I think that's very meaningful for myself. It's a product that I have confidence to be an expert in, and also it allows me to simultaneously explore my relationship with human and my relationship with nature. So that's how I eventually founded Tea Drunk. We had a tea house in the East Village for about 8 years, and we closed that location in 2021, partly due to COVID, but it's also not completely due to COVID. And since then, we have pivoted to become more an e-commerce business, and we also have a big wholesale arm where we sell to corporates, institutions, other tea houses, and hospitality businesses as well.
No, and everyone's like, maybe I should hike the Himalayas and find some mushrooms. I don't know. I know a lot about mushrooms. So we see some threads here that are really neat. Everyone has talked a little bit about adaptability. Also, we've heard about sort of enterprising elements where, Neela said, hey, why don't I do this externally? Or taking something, a passion that you have, and pivoting with it and saying, these are the things that I really love to do. And also your own journey in terms of coming back around to say, hey, who is this and who am I in all of this? But what I'm also inferring a lot is a lot of reflection. And I guess I wonder if we can start off by sort of suggesting, this is an interesting panel. You may be like, what does ERG and small business have to do? But ERGs, as we've been talking about in this prep, can really be a vehicle to open our worlds. And we often talk about networking. In Chinese, there's a very famous guanxi, right? There's like all these like connections that we have, and the world around social media and all these platforms is totally about connections. So leveraging those connections, LinkedIn. I already got a few invites. Thank you. Nice to meet you. But I guess I'm wondering, how are ERGs, maybe starting with Neela and then Amy, and then maybe a response then from Shunan, how do the ERGs, how have you seen them evolve into more of these like open spaces for innovative partnership?
I love that question. So certainly the community aspect of the ERG has always been there, right? But I think over this last year, actually, it's a very timely question. We've been talking a lot about, so just to level set, like at Goldman, we have 7 ERGs across dimensions of race, ethnicity. We all, I think, are fluent in this stuff at this point of the day. The Asian is actually the second largest, and we're across Americas and EMEA. And so part of the I'd say the challenge or the kind of opportunity with the network was how do we create more unity given the diversity within the community? So that was kind of thing one, is creating unity.
Yeah.
And then thing two was around really advancing, scaling impact and voice. And kind of feeling like we're not getting lost in the mix, wanting to have a real voice. And the third thing was kind of the way to get there. This gets to your question, commercial. And so when we think about being in a commercial, really client-driven enterprise, the number one thing that our CEO, David Solomon, talks about is client centricity, right? So all roads lead back to that, and that was really what we found was the entry point in for our community to say, okay, like how can we deliver value in that front? Not in like a instrumental way, but in a really like values-driven way. So so we did a couple things. I'll kind of share some examples to make this real. So last year for Heritage Month, we said, okay, we're going to have like the usual like panels, et cetera, but we wanted to give something of the firm to the larger community. So we were able to get our global investment. We have a research arm. They published a study called Asianomics. We have this thing with onomics. We did womenomics like 20 years ago. Then we did black womenomics. So now it's Asianomics. Okay. But it actually was, best-in-class research that we put out into the world. We published something for our clients and then for the broader community. That's a way in which, yes, we're like within our 4 walls, but we're actually having this much broader impact, like bringing Goldman Sachs research to the world. The partnerships have been really just, I think, dynamic and a way for us to connect those dots too. It's like, okay, yes, we can be on this board or we can be at this event, but guess what? We're here there with each other, but also with our clients. And so you start to see the ways in which the relationships really overlap. We were just talking, Vivian and I were just talking about this, that we're hosting at our at the firm in 2 weeks a roundtable with a number of our clients, and the scope is actually much broader than just the 8 firms that are coming together. It's to say what's something we can do together that impacts the broader community.
I love that. Yeah, consortium building, if you will. How about at Hennessy?
I think at Hennessy, I came, like I said, 3.5 years ago, and prior to me coming, ERGs actually didn't exist at the organization, which is really interesting, right? I think there were a couple across LVMH, larger, a women's coalition, and potentially one for black employees, but there wasn't really at our U.S. level. And my coming on actually was timed with our new CEO, Seth Kaufman, as well. He's not new anymore. He's been there just as long as me. But, and I think there was a lot of change within the organization. There's actually, we call it IDE, DEI, as you know, right? But we kind of invert the letters a bit because the inclusion part, is really important. And that was a conscious decision that the organization made. It's a nuance, but one that we really stand by. And I think the fact that there's, a corporate function now has helped, kind of legitimize the ERGs as organizations. We have resourcing, funding internally. There's buy-in from an executive level. But beyond that, and totally agree with all the things Neela said, we're trying to figure out ways that we can impact the business because, as you said, Nancy, ERGs operate as small businesses within the organization, right? We don't drive revenue per se, but there are these ways that all these sort of emotional and identity-based connections, how they can drive the business in tangible ways, but drawing those conclusions on paper is a bit complex, right? So, that's work that we as an ERG are trying to do in our spare time. But I think, just to go back to the question of how they've changed, I think they went from a nice to have to a need to have, right, in so many ways. For employees, there were times of crisis when we needed to come together as communities and to talk about the things that were affecting us that no one else understood, right? And I think, yes, I think some organizations are still checking boxes, but fortunately now that's a box they need to check. So, I think it's gone from something it's great for you to have it to if you don't have it, you are, you're behind the times and you are not relevant.
And Sunan, you got rid of your retail front.
Yes.
And you said, I'm going into partnerships. So can you share a little bit anecdotally around how, there's a blank slate. You could partner with anybody. You can partner with institutions, with your museums and all,
right,
but also with corporates. So tell us a little bit about how was the knocking on the door?
Of course, yeah. So just a little background info. The tea that Tea Drunk sells is very different from the teas that most people know. The tea that we sell, first of all, we sell probably some of the world's most expensive teas, but in our marketing language, we put it more elegantly, call it the world's most prized teas. But it's very expensive, right? And but the teas that we sell are also very specific. It needs to come from a very specific location, cultivar specific, and vintage specific. So it's more similar to wine. And part of the biggest challenge that has is that without educating the customers, we cannot just go up to a person saying, hey, the tea you're drinking now is $2 a cup. What about this $40 a cup tea, right? So that was the initial idea why we needed to have a tea house, is to give us the opportunity to educate the consumers, to bring that part of the culture more explained and more experienced. So once we don't have the storefront, we definitely have more challenges then to how can we continue to educate our consumers and to make the tea culture more internalized by the consumer so they feel like it's the value that they're paying for. And then partnering with corporations and institutions such as Museum of Chinese in America, like the event last night, it gave us the opportunity to let the audience know what is so special about the tea, and therefore, and we made sales, in addition to the ticket sales, we also made sales on the tea purchases last night as well. People are much more willing to buy into the concept of our product. So that's been immensely helpful, is to extend our reach of the cultural information we're sending to the end consumers through these corporate and institute connections, even though now we don't have a tea house anymore.
Appreciate that. And was it hard knocking on corporate stores? Was it just cold calling, or was it through your network, or what was the best vehicle for that sort of
Right.
socializing?
So I would say that sales is not the strongest part of our sales, of our team, right? But we have been fortunate enough that we always either have an opportunity that was close to our reach, or an opportunity will find us. And oftentimes that one opportunity will lead to more opportunities, right? So for example, even last night at the event in Mocha, among the audience, there was somebody from a major bank, and the person really loved the presentation, and he will come up to me saying that, hey, do you think we can do this again at our company? And so it's usually through these kind of opportunities that our business is able to grow, and then the impact snowballs. And I think that's also the power of ERG as well, is that it's a multiplier effect through small businesses like us, right? So while a larger corporation help one small business like us, not only we're able to hire more people, so job creation opportunities, but also we're so anchored in local communities, and we are able to then partner with other small businesses, sometimes together, to do a job for the corporate, and it also opened the doors for us to other corporates and institutes as well.
That's so interesting. And I'm just thinking about the genesis of the sort of ERGs and their investment in community. And I know at Goldman, probably 20 years ago, started the 10,000 Women and
You
thinking
read
about
my mind. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
but Urban Investment Group, of course, at Goldman was an investment in community. So I guess I'm wondering, Neela, if you start and then Amy, you sort of follow up, is there a strategic plan for your ERG? Because you could just go, like, there's an ocean and you're like fishing in the ocean, and there's a blank slate that you could partner with any one of a dozen people anytime you want, because everybody wants to partner with Hennessy and Goldman, particularly
Maybe more
me.
Hennessy.
But for different reasons,
yeah.
right? Capital and also for fun. So can you share a little bit about that strategic plan, if there is one, or is it sort of like opportunistic in terms of who's around the table?
I mean, it's yes and, right. Like, there's always opportunities that come up. But I think this might be helpful to talk about the philanthropy, the corporate engagement side of the house, because that's actually the door I came in through. And a lot of this strategy is kind of trying to, it's one firm, but often it can feel disparate because, people are working without the full context. So in corporate engagement, the firm has a foundation, and it's really an operating foundation, so it has a couple of these signature programs. One of them is 10,000 small businesses. So like, a decade plus ago, the firm, Goldman, said there's an opportunity here for us to really accelerate and kind of shine a light on small businesses, and the firm made a pretty significant commitment at the time, $750 million, but it was in the form of education and capital. So that kind of small business focus has been one of the guiding lights for the ERG, to say, hey, if we want to have impact, small business is a lever that the firm has really bought into. And so with AABDC in particular, John came knocking, as John does, and said, hey, there's this opportunity, and he always comes with great opportunities. He said, there's an opportunity for you all to really give back to small businesses, and not give back, but really invest in small businesses. And we said, well, this is actually an area that we've been doing a lot of work in for the last decade. So we gathered a team of our legal pro bono, legal folks to do pro bono advisory to, I think, 40 small businesses, which was impressive in short order. And by the way, this was championed by Wes Lai, who's a very passionate ERG leader. So it kind of, it's beautiful when that happens, when you kind of see, okay, this is the full enterprise, and these are the different aspects of it that we can kind of activate at one time. The other door, and then I'd love to hear what Amy has to say here, is community teamwork. And most of your companies probably have an employee volunteerism arm. We've been trying to be more strategic around that, where yes, you can go and paint a bridge for a day, and yes, there's some team building element, and that's fine, but I think if you can do something like this legal pro bono that has real impact, you're giving Goldman talent for free. So that's, I think, the aspect of how can the ERG partner with Community Teamworks, which is the employee volunteerism arm, to scale impact pro bono from Goldman Sachs, which, that talent doesn't come cheap, do that, and then also on the corporate engagement side, you've got the focus on small business. So that's kind of how you start to see some of these things kind of, to your multiplier effect, kind of build on each other in ways that I think can be really powerful over time, versus the disparate kind of doing things on a one-off basis.
I love that. And we, emphasizing that there was also this variable that came in, John sort of saying, hey, hey, hey.
That's right.
So, for all of us, we can be the hey, hey, hey person too,
That's
in our different respective, engagements. Amy, what do you think?
I think John's what the kids call the plug. But no, I think, strategy-wise, the ERGs, there's 5 across Moet Hennessy and LVMH. They're looking to add some more to that. But, I think there's been a focus on putting some, parameters around how we want to build the ERGs, to build engagement, and ultimately build a business case for them. And that's something that it's difficult, because I think, the folks that run the ERGs, it's volunteering their time. We do have resources, which internal budgets and an ID team that supports us, which I think is, really phenomenal in terms of, other ERGs that I've seen. And, I think one of the things that we strive to do, we kind of joke about this, but, we all throw great parties, and we want to do that right. And I'm underselling a little bit, the reason for the parties are, cultural awareness, helping people understand, why we celebrate a Lunar New Year or a Diwali, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's important for us to share why communities of color are important to our business, and how, and that's something that we're trying to do. But, to Neela's point, I think our ERG, it operates in this scrappy way within the organization, and that has parallels with, some of the ways that we partner with small businesses. When I was on the Hennessy team, worked really closely with John, again, on Unfinished Business, which was Hennessy's Give Back program. It started during COVID. The impetus was COVID. It really but we know that COVID just shined a light on the inequities within the communities of color. So, again, definitely go to Neela for the money. We're really proud that we've given close to $7 million out, but not 750. But we've helped over.
We don't want your money.
Yeah, we've helped over
we want the other
3,000
stuff.
small businesses, and Shannon, I think you were one of them that received
Yes.
capital during COVID, and it's been extended. There's a commitment to that, but I think that piece is so important. And one of the things we try to do within our ERG2 is if we are going to throw a party, right, we try to use AAPI vendors. It's really important to us to evolve from, just having the event to the impact, like Neela said, and when we send out a thank you for attending, we are plugging those AAPI vendors and saying, hey, hire these folks. We have an Asian DJ, we have an Asian photographer, we have Asian events company, women owned, so those are the types of things. I mean, it's definitely, I think, difficult to drive the ERG strategy within an organization when the organization itself, their business may not be in the business of DE&I, but it needs to be in order to drive as much impact as it can. So.
Well, and I think that's, I sit on the D&I side, but I advise the networks, and that's like the case building, right? I think of thinking of what are you doing and where, like to your point, like how does it tie to what and so, we're in a client services business, so clients were our case, but I think for every business, it's kind of figuring out what that case is, so that you're not going against the grain of the business.
Yeah. This is really useful, but we're going to make it even more useful. I'm going to open it up to the audience, and we're going to wrap up with tactical ways that you can actually leverage your ERG and sort of connect the dots in your orbits a bit more. And that might be, maybe your aunt is starting a other caffeinated beverage company. I don't know. But there are ways that you can advocate and be a part of the conversation. And I'm just also under, both Amy and Neela have referenced, I didn't know how much I could do in the spaces. And I think those ERGs are powerful entities to create a greater voice for yourselves. But still, how do you create the greater voice within yourself? And that's something at the museum, for example, we're always thinking about. How do you understand the Asian American journey a bit more so that you can have greater confidence? How do you understand why is there 12,000 acts of AAPI hate? Well, there was 80 years of exclusion of Chinese Americans. Trump didn't say Chinese, he didn't say Sri Lankan guy on the 7 train flew, or Filipino American woman on 42nd Street flew. He said China flu, Kong flu, Wuhan flu. And that's because there's a lot of discrimination and racism in that Chinese American element that have just carried on to a much broader network of AAPIs. So I want to open it up. There's a lot going on here, but open up to your questions, right? Tactical questions, but we'll also wrap up with our suggestions. Any questions for the panel right now? Yeah, please. And please say your name and identify your affiliation. And say it loudly.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, guys. Thank you guys so much for being my panelists.
Who are you?
Who are you?
Who are you?
Nicole again, Gen Zer.
We didn't say to say you're Jen. We just said.
Amy, I'd love to get. I don't think this mic is on, but I.
But you're good. You're
Loud
good.
enough? Everyone can hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're good.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Please do share your API vendors list because we're always looking out to partner with a lot of people from Chinatown, Flushing, Little India at Curry Hill. Also, Nancy, I actually did attend your Double Happiness event on behalf of Turner Construction back a while back. That was amazing. We were a little confused in the beginning, but the actors and actresses really had us fooled.
It's an immersive dinner and show with a 10-course wedding banquet. We're up in May.
So my question to all 4 of you guys is, with all the conversations about big impact, is out of your ERG experience, what has been the most impactful or most memorable event for the community, both professionally and for the community that you've had personally?
Yeah, thank you. Shunan, you can.
Gotta think
You know,
about it a bit.
it's on the tip of your tongue. I feel it.
Oh, well, I think there are many, right? Like as a small business, I think the help from larger corporations and institutes have been just immense to us. Sometimes it might feel like it might be just a small budget from a larger entity, but it's a really big deal for a small business like us. So I'm trying to think what is the most memorable. So I can give you one case is where we, ever since we no longer had the tea house, we tried to better our retail packaging so we can move into a more of a major market. And as a small business, as always, resource is very limited. And we have worked with amazing clients who will buy our products and give us the specifics how we need to improve our packaging so they will become our clients. And these are things that have just been so helpful to us, and I'm so grateful for how generous these clients are. It's actually two clients together who help us better our packaging, right? Because for a small business, what we will always worry is that we're not good enough for a larger client. But when you have a client who say, yes, but I still love the core, what your product is about, and we're willing to work with you and eventually give you lots of money to buy your product. And then we also have this solution that we can be applied to have our product become a mature retail product for more clients. So I think that was something that was very amazing to us. And it just really helped us to make the leap in terms of our product development and like market maturity.
I love that. Neela, yeah.
The most memorable event you were saying, right? So, allyship is allyship like totally saturated? Is everyone talking about allyship? Yeah. So, it's interesting because at Goldman there's been a lot of talk around it because I think the audience there is very like bias to action, execution, like give me the steps and I'll do it. And so we've been building these ally guides for like how-to. We're going to make these available externally eventually of like the how-to of allyship. So we did an allyship conference where we invited the cool part, so we invited clients, and that's like to be expected. But then we invited peers, and then we invited external partner organizations like ABDC and others. And like that was the cool part because I was in this room and you looked around, there were all these different relationships. So we filled up our auditorium, hundreds of people, and we had like Kenji Yoshino come and talk about allyship. You had, there were some interesting ones. It was like a really interesting kind of half-day program. But the cool thing was to see that like intersection of relationships, because I think you kind of think, okay, Goldman, like traditionally you'll think of kind of more of like the high net worth client or kind of the company that's IPOing, but to see the full breadth of relationships at the firm, and a lot of them were mine that I brought in, and so that was a very cool event to see what you can do at the organization.
That's neat. That's really cool. Amy?
I think I have a little bit of a twofold answer because I think, the thing that I have found the most meaningful to me within the ERG is, similar to what Neela said, the people and the connections I've made, both in the network and out of it, with my peers in the AAPI community at Moet Hennessy, but also through volunteers and organizations and different, connections that we made. But if I had to, create a singular moment, I think we had our Lunar New Year event, celebratory event in the office a couple weeks ago, and it happened to fall on the day after the Monterey Park shootings. There was Monterey Park over the weekend, then Alhambra, and that was really heavy, and it was the type of thing where, Lunar New Year is about celebration. Are we, how do we address this, but how do we not, And it felt like deja vu because, in a few years prior, we were having the very same conversation of we're supposed to be celebrating the Lunar New Year, but Asian people are being attacked. How do we talk about this, but how do we not talk about it? And so, I think one of the things that's so interesting about, what happened with those shootings recently is that, as we all know, the shooter was Asian, right? But I think that the thing that a lot of our white colleagues and friends may not understand is that just because someone is an Asian shooter doesn't mean their actions are not fueled by white supremacy or a hate for themselves even maybe, right? So I think trying to unpack all of that and that was something where we were trying to figure out how to speak about these things while also throwing a celebration. So, I was tasked with kind of tackling it, and, tried my best. But I think the fact that you can say, words like white supremacy to looking at a sea of my colleagues who are mostly white was a really pivotal moment that, I felt it was a safe space to say that within my professional community. And that was something that has been, very meaningful for me to be able to, bring those words to bear in a professional environment where, in the past I may not have really felt comfortable doing that. So
That is so valuable. And I think many of us have probably been cognizant of that shift in presenting those nuanced conversations in a workplace where, especially a driven workplace, like many of your professional affiliations, that you can actually be your, for lack of a better word, authentic self, and just like you're bringing it all to the table and how valuable it is. I have a question right here. Your name and affiliation?
Oh, I'm Nong Wen. Oh, sorry, is it on? I'm Wood City, and I was in the earlier panel, but Amy, I'm just so interested in hearing about your colleagues' reaction to the white supremacy term. And it's a very loaded term, and I know that right now in this country and globally,
yeah,
the DEI agenda is so politicized.
yeah,
And so, the idea behind having ERGs is to build more connections and not divisions.
yeah.
And I know at Citi, that's what we try to focus on. So I'd love to hear what some of your colleagues thought about the usage of that term.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I had people come up after and say thank you for saying that and that they supported it. I am sure there are people in the crowd who did not sit well with and who felt uncomfortable and who maybe didn't like it or thought it was inappropriate. I haven't heard anything back yet. I will let you know if I will, if I do, or if you see me looking for jobs on LinkedIn, you'll know. No, but I think that in terms of reactions, right, and division, right, like, I completely hear that, and I think we want to create solidarity with, all of our communities at the organization, but I think it's really important for us to understand and level set as well, and not have it be the type of thing where, it's all about just diversity and we accept everybody, but the underlying themes of, misogyny and white supremacy are there and have been there for a very long time, and if we don't address them, then it's never going to change. So, for me, I did feel comfortable saying that in that environment, given other conversations that have been had within the walls and the trajectory of the company and the way that we speak about, our communities of color and IDE. But, you never know, and that was something I was a little scared to say it, right? But I got positive feedback from, most people of color. Mostly, actually, one white colleague did say something, but I think, I am sure there are people who were not happy about it, but I'm kind of okay with that too.
Yeah. And I think we're all acknowledging that we're all in this discovery phase together. There's no obviousness on any of this, how our thoughts percolate, how people will react to us, and how things will get triggered and catalyzed. So I think if we all acknowledge that to some extent, the conversations can be had. So that's really powerful. Thank you so much for that question. Other questions? This is very, qualitative. Yes. Right. Yeah. You.
I'm Suzu from JP Morgan. It's great to see that all those ERG kind of organizations start to work on external engagement. And my question is, you have to, all these events and initiative, they need resources, they need capital. Sometimes you have to ask for resources and capital internally and maybe externally too. What are some of the practical kind of tactic you have deployed to kind of ask for resource, ask for senior support, and what are some of the value propositions that you used that was very convincing or helpful?
I like that. Thank you. Yeah,
You know I love this question. So I think a couple things. One is you need to like kind of map the relationships and like how it matters to people, because if it's just your voice trying to make the case, you can try to convince all the people yourself, but it's just better if you have other voices kind of reinforcing it. So whatever the thing is that you want, how does it matter to other people, and map that out, and then you can make if you get a couple more people who maybe have more seniority in the organization than you and they're championing it, that can be powerful, and that's where your personal relationships with them will matter, right? Because they'll hear you out. Okay, what's this thing you have, and then they can become champions. So that's one, is figure out the relationships. The second piece is make the business case for it. So with the HBCU funding that I was talking about, I made the case threefold. There was an obvious kind of recruiting case, and that was kind of where the organization was stuck a little bit. Like they only thought of HBCUs for recruiting purposes, and I felt that was a little transactional, frankly. And I was like, no one cares if Goldman's recruiting from HBCUs. I mean, like, kind of, but not really. And so I was like, what matters more is the reputation. So the reputational piece, like, is like kind of obvious. Like, if a firm like Goldman is making a double-digit commitment to HBCUs, like our clients paid attention, like the peers paid attention. So the reputational piece was the second piece. And then the third piece was actually the commercial piece, which is we have HBCUs as clients. We manage their endowments. We have clients who care about HBCUs. So if you can, that commercial case was actually, like I spoke with people in the business about it, and they're like, Neela, you're never going to get this money, but yes, there would be a commercial case here. And then we did get the money because we were able to build that. And then the last piece was make it multi-year if you can, so you don't have to ask every year. So like, it was
that.
a 5-year commitment.
I'd like a multi-year.
Yes.
Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the biggest things within our ERG when we're approaching any project is to just be as buttoned up as we can, right? And I think you think about your own work and the way you try to get your boss's buy-in or your executive buy-in, right? Have, all the things that Neela said, but have everything together as much as you can and make it hard for them to say no, right? Say, here are all the things, here's the great work we're gonna do, here's the results we're gonna get, here you go, all wrapped up in a pretty package, and can we have the money? And we have to do that, internally and to our brands, right? Because we work within, and leveraging relationships. I'm fortunate enough to sit in a central function at our company, so I know all of our brand folks who have A&P, who I can say, hey, can we have a little bit of these, right? And trying to strategically leverage those internal relationships in order to get what you need. But I love to hear, Shannon, too, on the other side, like what you've done.
Yes, so oftentimes when we establish a relationship with a larger corporation, it started out with a employee of that company who is a personal fan of T-Drunk. And the person, sometimes it's because the person really wants to introduce T-Drunk to the entire company. And sometimes I've even heard them saying that I really love T-Drunk's tea, and it'll be great if our company can work with you, and then we can get the tea for free, things like that, right? So it's from a personal interest to for the greater good, all sorts. But so I actually hear a lot of feedback on how the company will push back on a person's petition for the company to work with T-Drunk. And oftentimes what I see have worked, obviously I don't know at the back, but it's great to hear like what actually works and doesn't work in the back end. But oftentimes I would let the person know that what T-Drunk can do, which I think would benefit larger corporations. One of them would obviously be cultural awareness. And I remember even when I was working in Rolls-Royce, that's like 10 years ago, the company had a Circle of Excellence. And I'm sure many companies have that. And cultural awareness was a big element for those leadership training programs. So T-Drunk being it's a Chinese product can really help to develop that. And then secondly, especially for companies with salespersons facing high-profile clients, that a training on a high-end Chinese product can really open doors and conversations for these companies to some of the high-end Chinese clients. And then thirdly is employee happiness, right? Oftentimes when we finally are successful, then a employee and other employees of the same company, they will comment on, wow, they can't believe their company actually decided to work with T-Drunk. They feel very valued because they know that it's a premium product. And when a company is willing to offer this premium product and service to their employee, no matter if it's a one-off tasting event, or sometimes a company is even willing to build a tea room inside their company and have our product be complementary to the employees. So the employee feel that it's like at the early stage when Google was the first company that had all these like fancy cafeteria and things like that. Employees feel being valued in the company and they wanted to work for such companies. So all those factors together really help, I hope, make the case. And then there's also another piece which I hope companies care, but I don't know if they actually do, is the community piece, right? I was saying that the small businesses like us, we are very much anchored locally. So larger companies, by working with us, and oftentimes whatever we cannot do, we find another neighborhood small business to collaborate together to make it a fuller experience or product for the bigger companies. And that's a ripple effect. And also talking about reputational value, branding, right? We have Instagram followers. So all of these might be some of the pocketed opportunities the larger corporation from a centralized marketing function have overlooked in expanding the company's, pocketed reach, but through working with small businesses like us, it can actually reach into those audiences that the company didn't know that it was their audience before. Yeah.
Anyone from B of A here? No, it was John who introduced me to someone, connecting all the dots here as we wrap up, to someone at Bank of America, and they actually advocated for the museum. And then we became one of their community builders last year, one of 2 in New York City. I'm just thinking about all the different incredible points that were made here today as we wrap up. Amy shared so much from a very vulnerable standpoint, and we so greatly appreciate that, just in terms of your own journey and thinking about standing up and being truthful in those conversations, even though it's in a corporate environment where you've only been there 3.5 years, still learning the ropes, of a new sector, new industry. Neela really shared with us how she grabbed onto her power, and she wasn't afraid to go big. And getting that $25 million for historically black colleges is an amazing accomplishment. And just navigating and leveraging and getting all these folks together. And Shunan just taught us how we can be peaceful and happy and do what we love every single day and take significant risks. But then you get really good tea on a high mountain, and it's really prized. You are a prized group. Are we not? Yes? Yes. And I want you to join me in thanking our incredible panelists.
When you listen to some of the wisdom that comes from speakers, whether it's on panels or people that you've met, one of the things I took away was this notion of, are we doing enough to create psychological safety, to have open conversations? And as a community, we need to learn that. We need to learn to do it ourselves. We need to learn to advocate for others. We need to learn what it takes to create an environment of psychological safety where truths can be called out and you don't get, as she said, I don't want to be looking for another job. But the reality is that takes courage.
It does.
But that courage sometimes doesn't have to come just all out from inside you. It can come from a collective. It can come from a community that surrounds you to speak about it, to infuse that in you, because you may be the spokesperson, but you represent the voice of many others. That was such a powerful message for me, and I wanted to remind us to remember that. And on a slightly more amusing note, I came to this country from India, and I had never known tea bags. So in India, you cooked the tea, and I came to this country in the early 80s. So you put the tea leaves in boiling water, and you made the tea, and that's how you actually cooked and drank the tea. So the first time I come here, I go to the grocery store, and there's no tea leaves. There was only tea bags. So I buy the box of tea bags. I come home, and I tear open the tea bag, And I pour that into the water, and it is dust. It is tea dust. So it is the complete other extreme of what you're talking about. And I was reminded and calling home crying, saying, Ma, like they don't have tea leaves here. They only have this dust, and I don't know how to drink it. So, so you're talking about the arc of going from one extreme to another. So I honor what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. There's still a long way to go, but we're trying.
I love it. I love it. So thank you again. This has been a wonderful panel. Let's give them another round of applause. Yes. And you know, I have been calling out. Look at that. See, this, forgive me, I have to tell you, I've been, calling out Moet Hennessy. But guess what? There are 3 other sponsors. And so I want to give a shout out to our other sponsors. Colgate Palmolive is also a sponsor of this event, as is Pfizer, as is Ooh La La, the design store. So let's give them all another round of applause.